Demographic change, for example, the age structure of the population, will change the nature of work and the sectors of the economy that are growing and the sectors of the economy that are declining. But technological change, the way we actually produce goods and services, is likely to have a profound effect on the nature of work and on the allocation of human effort across society. We're in an era of absolutely dramatic technological change. We are in the digital age, and the process of technological change is so rapid that it is already causing major disruptions in the world of work, major changes in the structure of the economy. Well, let me say first that technological change as a driver of change of the economy and of the world of work is nothing new. We've been in a period of rapid technological change at least for the last 2 centuries, at least since the 6th age of globalization. As we've learned throughout our studies of the ages of globalization, technological progress, that is advancement or new ways to produce goods and services, to raise the output per worker or per work hour, has been a process from time immemorial, from before history itself could record that progress. But the pace of technological change has surely accelerated in the past 2 centuries. The industrial age gave us the modern world economy. Mechanization, the harnessing of fossil fuels, the breakthroughs made possible by the steam engine, large-scale factory production, large-scale mechanization of agriculture, and of the manufacturing processes, all meant a tremendous change in not only productivity, but in the nature of work itself. One of the defining elements of the age of industrialization was the replacement of human labor by machines. So machines substituting for human beings. And probably the single most dramatic area of the substitution of human labor by machine work was in agriculture. Because at the start of the 6th age of globalization, at the start of the industrial age, it was still the case that the vast majority of humanity lived in rural areas, and the vast majority of humanity was engaged in agriculture itself, or at least in activities related to agriculture, such as food processing or transporting foodstuffs and feed grains from the farms to the markets. But with industrialization, and notably with the mechanization of agriculture, that changed decisively. At the beginning of the 19th century, in the early 1800s, it was basically the case that one farm family could feed a little bit more than one farm family, so that each farm family could support a small proportion of the population that would be living in urban areas, with urbanization rates worldwide of 5 to 10%, and reaching urbanization rates maybe of 20 or 25 or even 30% in those few places that were already making progress in industrialization. But then came the mechanization of agriculture. And rather than individuals sowing the fields, individuals painstakingly taking care of the crops and then harvesting the crops by hand and collecting the crops by hand in a very laborious, or in technical terms, labor-intensive manner, came tractors and harvesters and combines and increasingly mechanized ways to prepare the fields for sowing, to sow the seeds for the crops, to tend to the crops during the growing season with the weeding or fertilization or irrigation, and then to harvest the crops at the end of the growing season. Every one of those processes became mechanized in the course of the 19th century. Of course, that mechanization did not reach much of the world by the end of the 19th century, but it did reach much of the world in the economies of Europe and North America that were most advanced in the process of industrialization. And lo and behold, what happened? What happened as agriculture was mechanized was that the proportion of the population that needed to engage in agriculture to feed the population fell sharply, whereas nearly everybody had to work in agriculture to produce enough food to stay alive. Because of mechanization and advances in agronomy, soon one farm family could feed 2 families, then 4 families, then even 10 families. And if one farm family can feed 10 families, then only around 1 out of 10 of the workforce needs to be in agriculture. The other 9 will be in urban activities, in manufacturing or in the service sector. And that's precisely what happened as mechanization replaced labor in agriculture. Now, one could ask, what happened to all of those agricultural workers who suddenly were not needed because their hard labor was now being replaced by the tractor, the mechanized plow, the combine, the harvester? And the answer is that those workers had to find other kinds of employment. And in some cases, that meant large-scale migration. Peasants in Europe whose occupations disappeared as the farm sector was increasingly mechanized in the midst of the 19th century migrated often to the United States, for example, which had a burgeoning industrial economy and which was able to absorb a large inflow of migrants coming from rural Europe. Within the United States, large parts of the farming employment, and notably African American sharecroppers in the U.S. South, lost their jobs to mechanization in the early 20th century and migrated northward to industrial jobs in the more industrial north of the United States. So, as mechanization occurred, the job structure of the economy changed, and some people lost their jobs, and other people and other occupations gained. What was the net effect of all of these changes? On average, output in the economy rose significantly as machinery raised productivity, but often those who lost their jobs faced poverty or hardship or the need to migrate in very difficult circumstances. One of the lessons of technological progress is that it doesn't necessarily benefit everybody at the time. Those who lose their jobs to machines may find a very difficult period. Perhaps their children will benefit in the new kinds of jobs, but the transition period during the mechanization or automation of the economy can be very, very painful and lead to significant changes in the income distribution. Now, in the 20th century, it wasn't just agriculture that saw the replacement of human effort by machines. It was the newfangled assembly lines themselves, one of the great innovations of industrialization that raised production by putting workers on an assembly line, that later on itself became automated. One of the most striking facts of automobile production in our time, and I've seen it myself in many automobile factories around the world, is there are very few workers left on the automotive assembly lines in many automotive factories now, because what you see is long lines of robots who are programmed to assemble very complex automobiles in a very systematic and predictable ways. I can recall even 20 years ago walking through a huge Toyota automobile factory in Japan that was almost silent. There were almost no workers around. It was the quiet hum of hundreds of robots smoothly assembling the automobiles. Every once in a while as we walked and I was gawking in amazement, I'd hear beep, 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 and that would be a robot that was carrying components or inputs, nuts and bolts and other components from one place in this vast assembly plant to another place, again on an automated basis. And that was before the most recent breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, in robotics, and in automation. So what happened to the agriculture sector in the advanced economies occurred after the middle of the 20th century, also in much of the manufacturing industrial sector, where machines substituted for human labor. Productivity rose, but a lot of workers ended up losing their jobs, sometimes pushing them into early retirement, sometimes pushing people into poverty, sometimes pushing people into very low-paid jobs that they had to take after they had lost their higher remunerated jobs on the assembly line. Well, now we are in an era where this kind of substitution of jobs for human labor is definitely accelerating. And we can see this in every facet of economic life. And one of the most important and telltale words of our time is autonomous. Autonomous meaning that machines not only replace human labor, but they basically run their own operations because they are programmed with artificial intelligence, with sensors, with machine protocols, and with machine learning that enable highly sophisticated behavior and therefore the replacement of highly sophisticated human activity. We have, of course, as we all know, autonomous vehicles that are self-driving, that are already on our streets, but are very much more common already in industrial facilities where it's not a public thoroughfare, it's an industrial plant where instead of truckers driving parts between the buildings, it's now autonomous vehicles without drivers automatically carrying the machinery and inputs from one place to the other. The warehouses, the vast warehouses of our digital age, increasingly being automated with autonomous vehicles. The mining sector, which from time immemorial was a place of very hard drudgery and very dangerous work, of miners is now increasingly a place where machines do the work autonomously. So autonomous machinery goes into the mine shafts and lifts the mining product and loads it into vast vehicles on the mine site, which then autonomously drive to the processing factories. So the number of workers in the mines is also dropping sharply. Agriculture increasingly is being made precision-based and autonomous, with drones or robotics used for precision fertilization in the fields, or precision provision of water and irrigation, or pesticides, enabling a dramatic reduction in the amount of chemicals applied to the crops without losing crop productivity. Of course, we see autonomous warfare already occurring with drones in the too frequent conflicts now taking place around the world. And we know that more and more autonomous weapons and autonomous killing even are surely on the horizon. In fact, artificial intelligence is becoming embedded not only in the production sectors for goods such as agricultural goods or mining goods or manufacturing, but of course in our service economy pervasively as well. And when our digital phones connect us with digital marketers, we're as likely or more likely to be speaking with intelligent machines as we are with human beings on the other line. So the replacement of human beings by machines is accelerating. The question for us is, what does this mean for the future of work? What does it mean for our well-being in the future? That's what we're going to consider in the next part of this class.